What is that Vladimir Putin really wants from Ukraine? Land, money, resources, people, respect, love, perhaps? Just in 2 weeks from now, in January of 2025, the most important page in the Russian-Ukrainian war will be written. The peace negotiations will start as soon as the new US president will be sworn into the office. I want you to know what Vladimir Putin is really after in Ukraine. Howdy, everyone. My name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. As usual, you will not find here BS, propaganda, or lies. Instead, you will find truth, common sense, and logic, and some emotions too, because I'm still a human being. The more I do this, the more I live stream, the more emotions I have, actually. Well, first things first. When I say Russia in relations to the war with Ukraine, I mean Vladimir Putin. It was his desire and his decision to invade Ukraine. Before the war, no one in Russia really wanted it, and everyone sincerely declined even a possibility of the war with Ukraine. And no one had even allowed a thought that Russia would ever fight with Ukraine, let alone invade Ukraine. It sounded like absolutely an insane idea. And I was the first who was denying this possibility. I was fiercely, against this possibility. And I was even making live streams about that, trying to explain why Russia would never do that. Not my finest hour, let's put it this way. They're still there on YouTube, and I'm not taking them down for the purpose. I want everyone to see the truth, what I did at one time. So anyway, more Russians had warm feelings towards Ukraine than ever before the war. I'd say most Russians had warm feelings. The majority of Russian people started supporting Putin in his decision to invade Ukraine, but it happened after the war started. Russian people have been skillfully manipulated into supporting. As it turned out, Russian people are very easily manipulated. No one in Russia needed this war, except for one person. So when I say Russia in relations to the war with Ukraine, I mean Putin, and I want you to know that. But make no mistake, I still think that all Russians, myself included, are responsible. We will bear the responsibility for the rest of our lives. I say Putin made that decision, but hey, again, make no mistake, we are all responsible. Now, I want you to understand what this war is not about, and that is very important. Now, right from the start of the war, this popular opinion of Russia's goal in Ukraine started circling among people in the West. I've seen it in the Western media quite a few times in the last 3 years. Many experts came out and said that, and many people left comments, even wrote me emails explaining their point of view why Russia needed the war, why Russia needed to invade Ukraine. And this opinion is absolutely wrong. Many think that Russia needs Ukraine for the land, for the resources. Now, this is a very wrong opinion. And this is why. Russia is extremely rich in two things: land and natural resources. Look at the map to see how huge the territory of Russia is. Russia is the largest country in the world, with people occupying just a small portion of it, west of the Ural Mountains. Russia is also immensely rich in resources, all kinds of resources. It is number 7 in the world in proven oil reserves and number 1 in the world in proven natural gas reserves. Russia has incredible reserves of gold, silver, diamonds, copper, ores of different kinds, cobalt, uranium, you name it, Russia has it. Russia has this vast lands used for agriculture. It has so much good land, and some of it is considered the standard, the gold standard for agriculture. It's called Chernozem, the black land. It very well could be the breadbasket of the entire world if it had proper business conditions and proper management, of course. Russia's serious problem is too few people. 146 million people occupy the largest country in the world. There simply aren't enough people to discover, extract, and process all the resources that the country has. Now, Russia certainly does not need Ukrainian land and resources. By taking even entire Ukraine, let's imagine that Russia somehow occupied the entire Ukraine. And it, in this case, it gains access to some resources, some land. That's not much compared to what Russia already has. But the risks of being ostracized, of being made pariah, of being placed under all international sanctions, and basically being isolated from the rest of the world are enormous. Why would Russia risk all of that just for the land solely? Okay? Why do you need all these resources that you cannot use yourself? You simply don't have that many people, and you cannot sell to others. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So this is why I think that this theory of Russia needing Ukrainian land and resources is absolutely wrong. So what does Russia and Russians need from Ukraine then? Nothing. One big nothing. Read my lips. Russians need nothing from Ukraine. Russia's Tsar, Vladimir Putin, does. Putin needs political control over Ukraine. He needs Ukraine as an independent country that exists on the political map of the world, independent on paper. He needs Ukraine as an ally promoting Russia's interests in the region. He needs a loyal government, perhaps puppet government. You can put it whatever you want. He needs a loyal government. He could influence the government that takes his orders, perhaps recommendations, perhaps suggestions. He needs a buffer between the West and Russia. He needs a tool to influence Moldova, Georgia, and other countries. That's what he really needs. Not Russian people, not the country, but one man. Let's remember what happened on February 24th of 2022. It's just gonna tell you something, right? Number one, Russian airports in the south and in the west of the country were initially closed for 2 weeks. At the end of the first 2-week period, this closure was extended for another 2 weeks, then another 2 weeks, then another 2 weeks, and they kept on extending this ban of using airspace and closing Russian airspace and closing all those airports, I think there are 8 of them, for almost a year. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. Then, only after 1 year, they closed the airspace permanently. Number two, Russian armed forces were warning Ukrainian soldiers not to resist. They were openly telling it was a military operation not aimed at the Ukrainian armed forces, not aimed at the soldiers and at the officers, but it was aimed at the Ukrainian so-called regime. That's what they used to call it. I remember quite well the footage, the films of Russian army broadcasting openly, calling the Ukrainian soldiers to surrender, and how I clearly remember they said, by surrender, just do not resist us. That's all. Number three, Putin used a lame excuse for invading Ukraine. He said it was needed to be denazified and demilitarized. Of course, no one believed him because there were no Nazis in Ukraine, and demilitarization, what the heck is that? Number four, Russian officials were trying to make an impression on everyone that it was the regime of Zelensky, the President Zelensky, that was full of Nazis, and it was the enemy of the Ukrainian people. They said nothing bad of Ukrainian people at first. Quite on the contrary, everyone was saying, poor Ukrainians, we are in there to help them, to get rid of the Nazi regime of Zelensky. You know, just a few people around Zelensky, and that's all. We're there to help out. Number five, Russian troops at the initial invasion carried two sets of uniforms, a regular one and a formal one used in military parades, just to show that no one planned for a very long campaign, long war. Putin kept publicly promising that Russia was not after Ukrainian land. I even made a live stream on March 22nd, I clearly remember that, March 22nd, 2022, when he publicly promised, saying, hey, we don't need the land, we will never occupy Ukrainian land. It's just needed to get rid of the key evil character, he said, Vladimir Zelensky and his so-called regime. And it all pointed that Russia didn't need Ukrainian land. It didn't need to station its troops in Ukraine. It didn't need anything like that. What was needed was the puppet government. And Russia grotesquely failed to achieve it. We all know what happened in the last 3 years. Russian economy is crumbling now. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed or crippled. 3 million of the best Russians have fled the country, and most of them have fled permanently. The army has failed to execute an offensive. The Russian army was punched quite a few times. It ran from quite a few locations. Moreover, a part of Russia, part of Kursk province of Russia, has been invaded by the Ukrainians, and they're occupying it for going on 6 months now. Well, I'm not even talking about Ukraine. That's a tragedy. You know, so many people have been killed and died, and the cities have been razed. I'm talking about that. I'm not even scratching the surface about Ukraine. I'm talking about Russia now, okay? So this is what Russia has achieved. Nothing good. How do I summarize of what has happened? Well, I'll try to do it in a very soft way. Putin has soiled his pants, destroying Russia in the process and destroying Russian future in the process. He's definitely the worst czar Russia has ever seen. So we are in 2025 now, waiting for the big peace negotiations to start. First of all, why am I so sure that there will be negotiations. Well, before I jump there, I'd like to take a sip of this wonderful tea. You know, it's already a tradition, you know, that I drink English breakfast mostly. This is good. English breakfast extra strong. And using this opportunity, I would like to thank you again. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for coming back to the channel every day. Thank you for commenting, sharing your opinions, your ideas. Thank you for sending me emails with words of encouragement, praying for me and with me, and thank you for sending me love. Thank you, friends. Without you, my life would be completely different. Thank you, those of you who have bought me coffees, who have supported me through Patreon and through PayPal. Thank you so very much. Your support is the only source of income I have right now, as I'm demonetized by YouTube, and the possibility of remonetization is, I don't know, foggy. So thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart. Now, going back to the message, why am I so sure there will be negotiations soon? Well, three parties need peace very bad. Ukraine, obviously, it's a victim of Russian aggression. It's been waiting for the peace for 3 years now. Russia had no reason to invade Ukraine whatsoever, and Ukraine has been defending itself. The sooner the war ends, the better for Ukraine. The second player is Russia. Russia, at this point, has a lower hand in this upcoming negotiations because it has depleted all, nearly all possible resources. Russian economy is crumbling. Russia has run into a large federal budget deficit. Money's run out. All the savings accounts that it had are dry now, empty. Russians, there aren't enough people to go and fight in the front lines. So basically, Russia is falling apart. And what it has been doing for the past 3 years, it's not sustainable. It cannot last long doing what it's doing. So it definitely needs peace. And the third player is Donald Trump. He promised the American voters peace in Ukraine in 1 day. 1 day. We all remember that. Hey, promise is a promise. 1 day it is. Well, I don't think it's about the promise. I don't really care. I don't think he cares much. And I certainly don't think he can bring peace to Ukraine in 1 day. It's just, you know, talking the talk is one thing and walking the walk is absolutely another thing. But I think that Donald Trump just wants to be remembered as hero in America and the person who brought peace to Ukraine. And if he achieves that, hey, that's going to be great. Many Western experts have been discussing the upcoming peace talks. Most agree that there will be some kind of a compromise. There should be a compromise. There will be no peace without compromise. Each party is going to give up something. And for Ukraine, it's a raw deal by default because, you know, why does Ukraine have to give up anything? It's just a peaceful country that's been invaded. But I still believe that there will be some kind of a compromise. And a lot of people see such compromise as to have Russia keep the territory that is currently occupying, or at least some of that territory. The land. They say the land is the most important. It's all about the land. You know, we're coming to that common mistake that many people make. It's not about the land, but hey, That's the popular opinion. It's all about the land. They say that if Russia keeps the land it currently occupies, as if Ukrainian land is Russia's goal, and Ukraine will become free to do whatever it finds necessary, to ally with any European country, with the USA, to build an economy, to maintain and build the army, etc., then, Russia keeps the land, Ukraine keeps whatever it wants to do, freedom. That's it. In this scenario, Ukraine needs firm guarantee that it will indeed become free to do anything it finds necessary. It will need firm guarantees against Russia. That if Russia breaks the word, Russia will get its teeth broken. The guarantees must come from the West, and they must be bulletproof. And the guarantees are something that Russia cannot afford for Ukraine to have. Because it's not about the land, it's about the country. If there are firm, agreed upon guarantees, agreed by Ukraine, by Russia, and by the West, then it's the game over for Russia. This is it. This is full stop. And it's certainly not what Putin wants. So when the negotiations start, look for the details. There are two important things to watch for. First, obviously, is the guarantee or guarantees for Ukraine. And second is the status of the land that is occupied by Russia. You see, by Russian constitution, these lands that Russia is occupying are already Russian. Putin managed to change the constitution just like that. Hey, the czars, the dictators, they can do that. It's not your democracy. So the Ukrainians, they also have the constitution. And according to the constitution of Ukraine, those lands are Ukrainian. Crimea is Ukrainian. Kherson is Ukrainian. Kharkov is Ukrainian. Zaporizhia is Ukrainian. Donetsk, Lugansk are Ukrainian. So these things that are what Russia might use to its advantage, it will try to divert attention away from this important, hugely important details to the land and try to fool the Western countries, making the land the focal point of the deal, leaving these details so to say, out of the sight. Russia will most likely use these details to achieve victory in Ukraine or to try to achieve victory in Ukraine. You see, at this point, it appears to be a multi-stage scenario. Most Westerners involved in the deal, the countries, the politicians, will be looking at the land as the key condition of the negotiations. Russia keeps the land, Russia perhaps keeps some of the land, and if Russia agrees on the land, they will be trying to force Ukraine to take the deal. And Russia will try to downplay the importance of these details. Okay? Everyone is tired of this war. The West is tired. The USA, the politicians in the USA are tired. The Europeans are definitely tired. Everyone wants peace. So there is a possibility that the politicians in the West will be pushing Ukraine towards accepting this deal. But you see, if Ukraine does, and, I don't think that Ukraine has an upper hand in these negotiations. The USA actually does, but I'll get to that later. So the politicians in Ukraine are plenty, and they are strong, aggressive, and feisty. I know quite a few of them personally. I lived in Ukraine for 1 year. I did business in Ukraine. I worked for a large corporation. We did government contracts. Trust me on that. It's not Russia where there's no political competition. Ukraine is so different, and that's why Putin hates it. He hates when there are many politicians competing. He hates when people have a say in the politics, okay? And when there's competitions, people actually have power. So it's very different from Russia. And there will be a disagreement on the status of the occupied territories in Ukraine in the future among the politicians. I guarantee you that. The politicians will fight with each other. And Russia will try to use that. Oh boy, that is going to be stage number 2. The first stage is the negotiations. And let's say that those two things are left unattended, so to speak. The land is set and confirmed. Both Ukraine and Russia agrees on that. But the status of the territories occupied by Russia inside Ukraine will be fought over. And Russians will use that opportunity to infiltrate Ukraine with FSB agents. They will be trying to buy politicians, to buy political parties. They will be trying to send their agents, undercover agents. They will be, well, they might be staging terror attacks. They will try to destabilize Ukraine society. They will try to seed the seeds of anger, of hate in the country. In Russia, this process is called rocking the boat. They will be trying to rock the boat in Ukraine. And they're good at that, trust me. You see, they failed to capture Ukraine on the battlefield. And they'll be working hard, very hard, to capture Ukraine from the inside. And that's exactly what Vladimir Putin wants from Ukraine. To fall under his control through propaganda and corrupt politicians. He desperately needs a break from this current situation. He needs to rebuild the army with a different approach. Don't think that if there is a peace between Russia and Ukraine and, that Russia will change just like that and will go back to the old, for more or less normal ways. No, no, no. Russian politicians and Putin have been working very hard, changing the paradigm of Russian society, changing the values, changing the goals, changing the attitude of people towards themselves and towards the world and towards the place that Russia has in the world. They have been gearing Russians towards the Russian world, whatever it is, And they're not going to just stop and say, okay, now we have peace with Ukraine, now let's reverse everything. No, that's not going to happen. What will happen? Vladimir Putin will start rebuilding Russian economy. He doesn't care much about it right now because he has more pressing issues. He has the war. Once the war is over, he will start rebuilding the economy to have a steady supply of everything to the military-industrial complex. And he will turn around and will rebuild Russian army from the scratch. But this time, it's going to be a powerful army. Not just like it is right now, a joke, a bunch of clowns. Okay, no. It's going to be different because that's going to be a priority. In the past, there was never a priority. In the future, you better believe it, it will be. And in a few years, Russia will possess a very strong army capable of fighting another war and capturing Ukraine quickly. If Putin is given this opportunity, that's what he desperately wants. Last year, 2 years ago, in 2022, in December, Vladimir Putin was in a situation called Zugzwang. The chess players know it. It's where when you make a move, any move, you place yourself in a worse position. Vladimir Putin was so frustrated that for 2 months he was nowhere to be seen in public. He skipped the public address to the upper house of Russian parliament, and it's something required by the constitution. He skipped the direct line, taking questions from Russian people and answering them live. He was nowhere to be seen. Some say, the ones who are in the know, they say he was depressed because things weren't turning out well. Now he has an opportunity to change everything into his favor. And this is what he's going to be trying to do. Donald Trump and the United States of America have the upper hand in the upcoming negotiations. American military-industrial complex is getting second life, so to speak, is getting revived. And a lot of countries are turning to the USA to buy advanced weapons. Russia has depleted its resources and cannot go like this, doing whatever it's doing for much longer. So Trump has an upper hand. Vladimir Putin is going to try to outslay him. Vladimir Putin wants Ukraine, truly wants Ukraine, without guarantees for peace. And he wants Ukraine in a situation where Ukrainian society, Ukrainian people fight over the status of the territories that Russia occupies and will occupy, most likely. This is what Vladimir Putin truly wants from Ukraine now, and this is what he hopes for the upcoming negotiations to achieve. Donald Trump should watch out, as Vladimir Putin is so much more experienced than Donald Trump. He's been in power, fighting off the attempts to take him down for 24 years now. Vladimir Putin, I believe, he can wrap Trump around his finger. I hope that Putin will not be able to do that. He will not be able to mislead the American people, the American politicians involved in the deal, perhaps the European politicians. I hope that Donald Trump proves to be the deal maker, the master deal maker he has been telling everyone that he is. I hope that Ukraine will get firm guarantees for peace. And I hope that this upcoming peace treaty will not be a raw deal for Ukraine. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Carthago delenda est.